Hi, I am Monica Campbell, Chair of the School of Education at Lenore-Ryan University. I have been a faculty member here at LR for 12 years. Prior to joining my colleagues in higher education, I taught as a cross-categorical special educator at Cheryl's Ford Elementary School, which is part of the Catawba County school system. I have degrees in special education from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. It is my pleasure to spend week 6 with you. Our session is Teaching and Reaching Out. So let's jump right in. I would like to begin our discussion with the dreaded, I have some good news and some bad news. Now, I am sure that you have undoubtedly made this statement at some point in your life. Am I correct? And I know you all know the question that follows that statement. So, what do you want to hear first? Well, which one are you most likely to choose? Did you know that there has been actual research conducted on this very question, what do you want to hear first? Multiple studies indicate that 4 of 5 people preferred to begin with the negative and ultimately end with a positive outcome rather than the reverse. Our preference, whether we are a patient receiving test results in a doctor's office or a student awaiting the end of the semester evaluation result, it is clear, bad news first, good news last. So, it is with this research in mind that I have structured our time together so that we discuss the bad news first by thinking about the negative impacts of COVID-19 on the education of K-12 students. We're going to focus on 5 of those issues. Then following that discussion, we will think more positively. That is, I will be able to tell you the good news about how COVID-19 has presented an incredible opportunity to be awakened with regard to educational reform. We will examine several policies associated with state initiatives and local efforts to help our K-12 students throughout the pandemic and, more importantly, beyond. So let us begin with the bad news. I have read numerous articles and listened to many podcasts related to the negative impacts of COVID-19 on education, and there has been a theme that has surfaced. It has been very troubling to me as an educator myself because it is the theme of inequity. I will describe multiple inequities in education that have been compounded by COVID-19 over the next few videos. We will begin with the most obvious inequity issue, and that is the digital divide, which has typically been defined as the gap in access to technology by socioeconomic status, race, and/or gender. This gap is only one aspect of what's thought of as a larger achievement gap, which has been thoroughly researched in the field of education. The achievement gap clearly indicates that in the United States, there are persistent gaps separating students. On average, minorities score below that of their white peers in math and reading, and graduate from high school and college at lower rates. Also, students who come from families with more economic resources outperform peers who have less. So, the digital divide is one more symptom of systemic inequities. This digital divide gap in education did exist pre-COVID-19, but it has been exacerbated by the pandemic. Here is what we know. Schools were forced to close, and school systems did their very best to respond as quickly as possible. Schools attempted to provide devices to students when possible, but providing one-to-one devices was a priority before the pandemic. The digital divide existed before the pandemic. We were trying to close the divide, we were trying to close the gap. But we discovered that just having these devices and getting these devices in the hands of students did not allow educational organizations to begin closing the gap. Why? Having access to a device without access to the internet is not very helpful. The Center on Rural Innovation estimates that 4.6 million students in rural areas nationwide lacked access to broadband internet. As a result, during the pandemic, they did not have an equal opportunity to access materials, virtual class sessions, and conferences with their teachers to meet course requirements. In fact, it is so sad, but I have to report that many students from economically disadvantaged homes were completely unreachable once schools closed. Those with access to the internet and a device who live in homes with multiple siblings often had to share. I have a colleague and a friend who lives in the eastern part of the state, and she has 7 children at home. She was also teaching classes for a university online, and when she was working, the older children took on the additional responsibilities of helping the younger children complete their work and explained new concepts to them. All the while they were attempting to fulfill their own course requirements. Then there were multiple issues with which children can meet with their Zoom classes at what time because of the bandwidth issues and just having a limited number of devices in the home. Now, what about those students without access to the basics? That is, they did not have access to a device of any kind. What happened to those students? Many teachers responded by photocopying packets of work that the students were expected to complete at home. As a result, parents became teachers, and that's in the best case scenario, right? As a parent who has provided supplemental instruction at home, I just think back to the number of times while I helped my child complete homework during her elementary days, I heard, "That is not how my teacher does it." I cannot imagine the relationship difficulties between caregivers and their children once all the work was sent home. In addition, access remained a problem. What happened in homes where there was limited transportation and there was no one to pick up the packets? I had this realization when I visited a school most recently and saw multiple packets still waiting to be picked up, long after the school year had officially ended. What happened to those students during COVID-19? What instruction did they receive? How much? Any? And what does it look like as students prepare to return to school in the fall? How much or how wide will the gap be between the various groups of students? I speculate that the gaps will be unprecedented and will have lasting effects for the foreseeable future. Would you agree?